So we very much appreciate you taking the time today to swing by the litigation section's lessons from litigators. Today we're going to be talking about Cybersecurity 101, protecting your data before it's too late. My name's Jason Crow. I'm the co-chair of the Privacy and Technology Transactions Group here at Miller Johnson. I've been at Miller Johnson for 6 years. Prior to that, I was at a large firm based out of Chicago. And I'm, generally the person here at Miller Johnson that is on the front lines when you have a data breach, when you have a software as a service agreement to be reviewed, when you have any type of technology transaction happening, I basically say to everybody, all my clients and folks within the firm, if it involves the internet, come talk to me. So I'm joined today by Elise Hildreth. Elise and I are just lawyers. We're not IT people, but we know enough about IT and cybersecurity to, I think, really kind of translate cybersecurity and technology to, the head of HR, to the CFO, to the C-suite. And that's our sweet spot. We spend a lot of time in this space kind of helping companies, medium-sized, large, international, regional, companies of all size really understand cybersecurity risk and really help companies focus on mitigating that risk. But we'll kind of get to that here soon. So Elise, I don't know if you want to quickly introduce yourself.
I just graduated from Michigan State College of Law 2020. I did join during a pandemic, which was very interesting, but Jason graciously accepted me here. And now I'm the Privacy and Technology Transactions Associate here at Miller Johnson. We've been working on a lot of XaaS agreements, data breaches. So we have a lot of info for you today. I'm happy to join.
Whenever I talk about cybersecurity and cybersecurity law, privacy law, data security, I always like to start with the data. What's happening on the ground. Next, Elise will cover cybersecurity compliance challenges that businesses face, and really the secret there is we're going to cover the law. So a lot of times, in fact, we have 10 summer associates at the firm this summer, and when I approached one of them to say, could you help me with a couple projects here, they said, well, what law applies to cybersecurity? And so we're going to kind of cover the waterfront on that. We're going to be, we're not going to go very deep, but we're going to try to cover the waterfront for folks. I noticed there's a lot of people from Michigan. There's maybe a few people from out of state. So we're gonna try to make this useful for everyone. Next, we're going to talk about strategies to reduce cybersecurity risk. And like I said, that tends to be our sweet spot. We get a lot of phone calls asking, what can we do to mitigate our risk, to comply? We talk a lot about that. So then, the last thing we're going to talk about is vendor management, anything as a service agreements. So I don't know if folks on the line have heard of this XaaS agreements. It's relatively new to me, but once we get into it, I think it'll make sense. And then I want to talk for a few minutes about fortified cyber defense. Fortified cyber defense is a product that Miller Johnson developed in partnership with a local managed IT services provider. And what fortified cyber defense is designed to do is kind of give companies, it's compliance as a service, basically, and it's cybersecurity as a service, and it's supposed to give companies a baseline cybersecurity program, because our clients actually call us all the time and say, hey, I don't even know where to begin with mitigating risk around cybersecurity. I've got insurance, but I haven't even looked at it, or I've got insurance and I paid like $2,500 for it, and I'm not sure if it's going to cover anything. So we kind of created a compliance as a service cybersecurity program that hopefully you all will find very interesting. So let's start with solid data on cybersecurity risk. So as I said, I always like to start every presentation with show me the data. And, given that we're talking about the internet, I thought I would, show a couple memes. So the data, I just looked. So this is the latest cost of a data breach report. It's the IBM Panoman Institute. I always butcher that name. The Panoman Institute has been doing surveys over the years to determine the cost of a data breach. So when we're looking at the data, the key is, in my mind, is figuring out where it comes from. So for this report, researchers collected in-depth qualitative data through more than 3,200 separate individuals at 524 organizations that suffered a data breach between August 2019 and April 2020. So, during that time, I would say Miller Johnson handled probably 10 to 12, data breaches in maybe 30 data security incidences. And because not every data security incident is a data breach, right? So actually data breach is a legal term of art. And just to kind of give you some more background about, my practice and the Privacy and Technology Transactions Group is that, we handle data breaches, and we handle dozens and dozens of them. And, over the years, we've had to, work with hospitals. We've had to work with home healthcare organizations. We've had to work with manufacturers. We've had data breaches involving, $750,000 being swept out of an account, a business account that was supposed to be used for payroll. We've worked with the FBI routinely. We've got the FBI on speed dial on my cell phone. And when someone loses a bunch of money due to a data breach or a data security incident where there's been a hack into the system, passwords have been compromised, and accounts have been swept, that's when my team, including Jeff Muth, which a lot of folks on the line here are probably familiar with Jeff Muth. Jeff Muth is the co-chair of the Privacy and Technology Transactions Group. Him and I and Elise will jump on the line. We've got a CISSP. I'm not sure if it's fully gone through yet, but we've got a gentleman that helps us out internally, a security engineer that helps us out internally. I think his qualification goes through soon. We've also, partnered with a forensic IT firm, BDO USA LLP is the group we like to go with, but we've worked with lots and lots of others. So what's interesting about this report is you're going to see some really big numbers, and what's interesting though is you've got you still, the numbers are going to reflect data breaches that have, that ranged in size between 3,400 compromised records and 100,000 compromised records. And so a lot of times in the first phone call that I get from a client to mitigate cybersecurity risk, I'll say, how many souls do you have on board, right? So, it's kind of that plane analogy. And what I mean by that is how much personally identifiable information or protected health information does your organization collect and store? Is it just in your HR files, or are you consumer facing and actually getting personal information from consumers? And kind of data mapping how many records you have ultimately becomes the amount of exposure you have under data privacy and security laws, right? So if you minimize the amount of personally identifying information you have and PHI that you have, you are mitigating risk. In fact, in the first 10 minutes on a phone call with a new client, they said they had a client relationship management database through Salesforce. And I said, oh, that's great. Well, how many souls do you have on board? And they said, 150,000. I said, okay, well, now I'm going to start thinking about the laws that would apply to that amount of people. And then I said, well, where are they located? And, they said all over the country. And so we started doing an analysis to say, okay, what state laws would apply, because the state law of where the individual resides is the one that applies. And then just through conversation, we found out that their CRM, they backed it up to a local network drive that was actually connected to the internet. And so they had like 150,000 souls sitting on Salesforce.com, which to me is pretty secure. But then, on the local network was this backup. And in fact, when we looked at the backup had like 400,000 souls. And so, within like 10 minutes or 15 minutes of just talking about mitigating cybersecurity risks and data privacy risk, we learned we actually reduced the risk almost in half, right? And so oftentimes I say to clients, the first step to mitigating data privacy and cybersecurity risk is caring about it. And if you call me up and we spend 15 minutes, I won't even charge you for the first call. But a lot of times, just talking to me in the experience that Elise and I and Jeff Muth have, we can really help you out. So that when we look at these records, you correlate the number of records you have to the amount of risk you have. There's the 7 million figure, right? So the average cost of a data breach, according to this report, which by the way, I was in a room of like 250 cybersecurity experts at the West Michigan Cybersecurity Consortium. And I said, what's the report that you would say is the best? And we looked at a lot of different ones, right? And the one that we found, the one that at least the group, the collective wisdom was, this was the report. So if you don't like this data, it's still good data. But anyway, so 7 million is the average cost of a data breach. 80% share of breaches that included records containing customer PII at an average cost of $150 per record. The average total cost of a breach at enterprises of more than 25,000 employees, compared to 2.64 million for organizations under 500 employees. So the larger the organization, the more that a data breach costs. The smaller the organization, the less a data breach costs. And in our experience, and at least you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like in our experience from the legal side, most data security incidences cost, anywhere from like 15,000 to 60,000 to up to like 110,000. That's on the legal services side. On the forensic IT side, it tends to be anywhere from 35,000 to 150,000. So I guess if you kind of look at these numbers, those are the national, like the international numbers. I would say the West Michigan kind of day-to-day numbers are more like what I just said, which is a little bit more palatable. So what type of records are compromised? If I look at the attendance sheet for today, and we're up to 68, I'm hoping to get to the 150 that we had signed up. But if I look at the attendance sheet today, I see folks across all industries, right? And so you may be sitting at a manufacturing plant saying, none of this stuff really applies to me because I manufacture things and I do a really great job. And in fact, we have no consumer, we do all business to business. All of our business is business to business. And I would say, well, you still probably have some customer PII. You definitely have your employees' PII. And then you probably have intellectual property. And so if you look at the second highest, compromised type of record, it's your IP. So if you're a manufacturer and you're on the line today and you think, okay, well, I'm caring about cybersecurity because I showed up at 8 a.m. to this webinar, but I haven't really cared about it that much. I think these numbers may persuade you to kind of, maybe care about it a little more. So here's kind of the types of records compromised. And the type of record compromise correlates to how expensive it is to respond to a data breach. And we'll kind of get to that. So if you like, what are the costs that are baked in, right? So, here it's a little bit hard to read, so you might have to squint at the screen. I'm actually kind of leaning in. Lost business cost is 40%. Detection and escalation is 30%. Notification is just about 6%. And then, post response is at about 25%. So like the remediation you do, upgrading to Microsoft Office 365 in the cloud rather than hosting your own kind of homebrew Exchange server. In fact, just to focus on this total cost slide here, oftentimes what I say to folks is, you know, a data security incident isn't about avoiding getting sued by people, right? Like I think, especially I'm a litigator, you showed up to Lessons to Litigator. I was trained up that way, although I am a certified information privacy professional. So, you know, 5-6 years ago, when I kind of saw the way the world was going, I said, you know, I started working on a bunch of data breaches at my prior firm. And then, you know, here, I've made it my life's mission to kind of become the best in West Michigan, handling data breaches, technology transactions, and those sorts of things. But what I say to folks is, you don't worry about people suing you. In fact, the courts have made it difficult for individuals that have been compromised in a data breach to sue the organization. Now, you always see like Facebook, and you see some of the monsters getting sued, and some of the big folks, but that's not really the cost. The cost for, you know, 98, well, for almost 100% of my clients, because I've only had like 2 or 3 litigation matters in the last 5 or 6 years involving data security incidences. I've had a couple big pieces of litigation around a technology transaction going awry, though. In fact, you know, we'll get to that, but I think it's more important to make sure you should worry more about your technology transactions that you're entering into and having a qualified attorney review those and mitigate your cybersecurity risk involved in those technology transactions. You should worry about that more than about getting sued in the event of a data breach. What you need to worry about in the event of a data breach is the cost of containment and the business interruption costs. So one of our clients was ransomware. They had a ransomware attack where their entire network, it was a healthcare organization, their entire network got locked down by ransomware. And that's what ransomware does. It locks an entire network down if it can get access. And they were down for like 4 days. And so if you can imagine, you know, you couldn't enter notes into the EHR system. And when you can't enter notes into the EHR system, the electronic health record system, you can't submit them for billing. And if you can't submit them for billing, then you're going to have delays. And, you know, imagine if you're running a manufacturing plant or some other, you know, any other business, and you go down for like 2 or 3 days, there's true cost to that. And it's reflected into this chart. So what causes a data breach? Well, I'm going to give you the answer that I think applies 80, 85, 90% of the time. It's human error. It's us. It's me. It's you. It's being super responsive during the day, clicking on links, you know, emailing sensitive data, even internally without any password protections on it. Emailing sensitive data. I mean, this happens all the time. In fact, Elise has a small cottage industry at Miller Johnson of writing letters on behalf of clients when sensitive information left a client's building and was sent to the wrong person. And so what we have to do is we have to do the letter campaign, figure out if there was any further disclosures, ask them to delete it, ask them to destroy it. And that can be a simple matter sometimes. And then we've had situations where it's involved the disclosure of, you know, the entire assets of you know, of a very, you know, wealthy person. So, and that included financial account information, you know, assets, the whole picture, you know, left the building from this particular client. And we had the very, very awkward situation of dealing with that, you know, on behalf of the client, you know, had to deal with that. So, but if you look at this chart here, right, it says human error 23%, malicious attack 52%. I think you smush those together and you get to 75% is human error, because the malicious attack often involves human error, right? And you know, it's people clicking on phishing links, it's people sending out stuff. So, and then you see 25% is system glitch. And I'm not even sure, I haven't read this report in a little while. I'm not even sure what system glitch is, but I would say that's probably the IT world portion of this. I know there's some director of IT folks on the line, and I won't throw you under the bus, but I'm guessing that's what they're trying to capture is when, you know, like Microsoft just had this, it may still have this vulnerability that needs to be patched. And in fact, the FBI, well, no, it was it was the White House that reached out to everyone, including, security engineers all over the country, and said, hey, there's a vulnerability in Microsoft and you need to patch it, and you need to patch it now. And I think that's where system glitch, that would like kind of fall in the system glitch at 25%. And at least I know I'm just cranking through this stuff. And if you have any comments, feel free to jump in. Okay, so the breakdown of what's going on here. So, business email compromise, 5%, social engineering, 3%, compromised credentials, 20%, cloud misconfiguration, 20%, a vulnerability in a third-party software, 16%, phishing, 15%. So, and then you've got malicious insider. So the attacks can come from everywhere. Malicious insiders, your third-party service providers, all this stuff. So that's where this comes from. Yeah, so it says a majority of malicious breaches were caused by compromised credentials, cloud misconfiguration, or a third-party software vulnerability. So there's your main culprits here. And so, when folks ask me how to mitigate risk around cybersecurity, I kind of start there. I say, well, do you have a password policy and do you enforce it? And they're like, well, no. And I say, okay, well, that's a good place to start, because that's 20%. That's 20% of your risk. And then, and then cloud misconfiguration, that's a little bit technical, but I know there's a bunch of companies on the line right now that are operating a lot of stuff out of the cloud, whether it's through a third-party service provider or even their own, private cloud things. And so you need to be careful there. And then this is the fun part. This is where at the end of this, towards the end of this presentation, we're going to talk about vendor management. And the reason we're going to talk about vendor management is because, look at third-party software vulnerability is in the top 3. So this gives me a chance to pause and hopefully make a couple people laugh. I love this picture of Bill Gates, and I think it's a funny slide. So I like the data. I think we can't talk about this without talking about the data. So this next thing, 6 things every small business needs to know about ransomware attacks. So what we're seeing lately in Elise, when she joined us, it was the largest ransomware attack that Miller Johnson had ever handled in the history of its career. She walked into. That was her first big project. So ransomware is everywhere. And the one thing I want everyone to walk away with is that if you're a small to medium-sized business, which I think a lot of the companies on this line are small to medium-sized, companies. I don't think Target's on the line. I don't think Facebook's on the line. I don't think, even the $5 million companies, the $10 million companies, the $25 million companies, $150 million companies. That's kind of where I would say the small and medium-sized business. And that's kind of a lot of the clients that we have. We have startups too, as well. But here's this quote, and it's brand new. It's the Department of Homeland Security's Secretary Mayorkas. 50 to 70% of ransomware attacks are aimed at small and medium-sized companies. So right now we're in the midst of a huge ransomware attack situation, and we're dealing with ransomware attack, I don't know, once a week, once every other week here at Miller Johnson, on behalf of clients. And it's hitting everybody. And then this was, I tried to find out if this was a good statistic, but it says 60% of small businesses fail within the 6 months of an attack, and 80% of victims are hit a second time. I couldn't verify this statistic, but Inc. is a pretty reputable website. This is what they say. And I thought it was an interesting statistic. And then, so here's where insurance is important. I think a lot of folks have insurance. I think, every year you should take a look at it and figure out what you're going to do about it. Because it's what we're dealing with now is clients are having a harder and harder time placing insurance because of the ransomware attacks that are happening. And the fact that, as everyone just started checking boxes on their cybersecurity insurance application saying, yeah, we've got this, we've got that, we've got this, we've got that. Well, then they got attacked, and it turns out they don't have this, they don't have that, they don't have all these protections baked into their system. And the insurance companies are getting tired of that. And their loss runs, their loss runs at the insurance companies related to ransomware attacks are huge. So like insurance companies are tired of giving away cybersecurity insurance. Let's just put it that way. So let's keep going. So those are the costs. You've got consulting and legal services, restitution to victims, regulatory fines, recovery technology, and then ransomware extortion. Like I said, our last ransomware attack was a $4.1 million ransom request. We did restore from backups, so we didn't have to pay that ransom. So that was good. Cyber insurance most often covered the cost of third-party services and victim restitution. So it covers the cost of the work that I do in a data breach response. It covers the cost of a forensic IT firm that comes in, shuts down the data breach incident, and gets the company back up and running. And so it's hard to mitigate risk through contract. So your contracts with your third-party service providers, your web hosts, your Microsoft, it's kind of hard to mitigate risk through there because a lot of times you don't have a lot of leverage because you're just another, one of many clients. And so cyber insurance becomes the way that the company can protect itself, because that's something you can control, right? You can get good insurance. You can get high coverage, right? You can get $3 to $5 million in coverage. You can get low deductibles, right? You can get, $5,000 deductibles, and you're going to pay a little more, but that right there is what's going to protect you, right? You're going to want business interruption coverage. You're going to want cyber extortion threat. In fact, we just talked to a carrier yesterday that said, if you take a look at your cyber policy, it probably has ransomware protection in it. Well, the insurance companies are starting to not make that be a basic coverage. No longer a basic coverage. Ransomware has gone from a basic coverage within like the last 2 or 3 years to it's gonna be something you pay for. So this gives a little pause. Yeah, if we could just stop clicking on phishing emails, that'd be great. So this is where Elise is gonna try to plow through the law very quickly. Just to give you a preview of the law, as I said, we can't cover everything. The cybersecurity and data privacy laws in America is a patchwork quilt. In fact, when my mentor at my old firm introduced me to this whole practice and said, maybe you want to do this for a living, I think the first thing she told me was, it's crazy out there. There's a patchwork quilt of laws. All of them are pretty similar and have the basic fundamental things. But the analysis as to what applies to you and your industry isn't always straightforward, but we'll Elise will walk through that quickly here for you.
So basically what's happening in America is kind of the Balrog and Gandalf situation. Balrog, the fire monster in Lord of the Rings, is saying, are the bad actors, the inadvertent emails of data being shared, and Gandalf is saying, you should not violate my privacy. That's the states, that's California, that's Colorado, Virginia, and Florida that didn't pass a law, but they're saying no more violating privacy. Let's put in statutes to stop that going on. We'll start with the most recent Michigan law, which is the Michigan DIFS law. This is governed by the Department of Insurance and Financial Services. It applies to and regulates insurance entities here in Michigan and requires a written information security program. Basically, no more are the days where you can just say, yeah, we protect our data. You have to write it down, say what exactly you're doing, have an incident response plan if something is to happen, and detail your administrative, technical, and physical safeguards. The administrative safeguards are doing risk assessments every year, see where you might need some patches in your network, designating a privacy officer. That's someone that if something was to happen, they will be notified first and they'll contact their counsel, some IT to help bring back the system after a data security incident. Physical safeguards include limiting access to the data in your office, whether that's file cabinets, any paper records, shielding computers, anything like that. Technical safeguards are encryption of data, automatic log off, just making sure we're protecting data as much as possible.
So, Michigan DIFS law applies to folks that are licensees. So this would apply to the people on the line that have registered with the Michigan Department of Insurance and Financial Services as a licensee. So, I'm thinking insurance companies, insurance agencies, especially, insurance agencies are required to implement this program and then certify to it, as Elise was talking about, every year. And there's various types of companies that are licensed, but you know who you are if you're a licensee under the Michigan Department of Insurance and Financial Services.
So the DIFS law, as you can see in this screenshot here, has very specific requirements of what you need to do, what it needs to be in your written information security program. It especially says you need to protect non-public information, and that's whether it's like social security number, driver's license, any personal identifier tied with another private piece of information, personal information. Michigan also has a general data breach notification law, and this applies to any person, entity, agency, business really that owns or licenses data. Again, it protects personal information of Michigan residents, including social security numbers, driver license numbers, and financial account numbers. If you discover a security breach, you have to notify the person whose personal information was accessed or acquired. Again, security breach, the access required takes a little bit of legal analysis to see if it was actually a security breach or a security incident and whether notification is required, usually requires legal counsel. Now that notice has to include a description of the breach and compromised information, description of the steps taken to protect against further breaches, contact information of the business in case that person has any questions, and a reminder to the person whose data was breached to remain vigilant. This is a kind of a template law. A lot of states are adopting a similar law. Other states require credit monitoring for persons who personal information was breached. Michigan isn't quite there yet. But if you're in others have information of other residents of other states, that might also be a requirement. And Jason.
Yeah, no, that's right. And so after a data breach, you have to find out, where all the people that their information has been accessed reside, and then look at those states. And as Elise said, each state has its own set of requirements. And so, we found even Michigan, a lot of Michigan-based companies end up having folks who, they collect their information from states all over. And so you have to go to each state to figure out what you got to do. And it's crazy.
Now, this is the big monster in the country, the California Consumer Privacy Act, the CCPA. And excuse me, California does not do a great job of acronyms. We're going to go through a couple of those. But this one became operative January 1st, 2020. It applies to businesses that have 25 million or more in gross annual revenue, buys, sells, or receives personal data of 50,000 or more California residents, and receives is very broad. It can mean just you have that information, whether you're engaged in e-commerce and you kind of have their name, number, credit card information, or if the business derives 50% or more of their annual revenue from selling personal data. The CCPA also grants new consumer privacy rights, kind of similar to the European GDPR, if you're familiar with that. Won't cover that today. It's for the consumer to know, access, and delete their private information if they see it on the internet. Consumers also have the right to know if personal information is being sold, and they have to have the right to opt out of that sale. So if there's any business in California, you're selling personal information, you have to let them know and let them opt out if they don't want their personal information to be sold. So the CCPA also imposes new obligations on businesses. You must implement security procedures similar to what Michigan does, and must provide consumers notice about their data in their website privacy policies and terms of use. California also grants the consumers a private right of action if their data is subject to a breach. So not only did California have the big CCPA last November, California voters in a referendum voted for the passage of the CPRA, the California Privacy Rights Act. This doesn't become operative until July 2023, but it acts with the CCPA and is more like an overlay over it. It covers all the same entities under the CCPA, expands the list of consumer rights created by the CCPA. Instead of private right of actions and complaints going to the California Office of Attorney General now, there's a new regulatory body that they're developing now, will be fully in effect by 2023. It's called the California Privacy Protection Act, the CPPA. The acronyms are a little weird. Yeah, so that's the CPRA. Also, one thing about that is that instead of applying businesses catering to 50,000 or more California residents, it ups it to 100,000. Now, Virginia also passed a similar Privacy and Data Protection Act called the Virginia Consumer Data Protection Act. Also effective in 2023, applies to companies controlling data for 100,000 or more consumers and those selling personal data. Those companies must limit the amount of personal data they collect, avoid using personal data for undisclosed purposes, and maintain reasonable data security measures. Colorado also, the legislature also passed maybe a couple weeks ago, a similar privacy act to Virginia. As of yesterday, the governor has not signed the act, but is fully expected to do so in the coming weeks. Again, it would be operative in 2023. Applies to companies that process data of 100,000 or more customers or derive revenue from the sale of data. Also requires them to implement data security measures, and consumers are given data privacy rights. So in sum of all of that, what this shows to us, we have to analyze what personal information you have. Even though you're a Michigan business, you might have the personal information of people in other states. And if there ever is a data breach or data security incident, you need to analyze what laws would apply to that information if notice needs to be given. And it helps to have a comprehensive written information security compliance program to know what all applies, what you're going to do in the event of a data breach or incident. Train your employees on that program. Let them know what will happen if they lose email in a phishing email, lose data in a phishing email, to go to the privacy officer, bring it up to council, figure out what has to happen, implement an IT security program, and purchase cyber liability insurance. And especially purchase cyber liability insurance now, because the cost just keeps going up. And as Jason says, they're not going to want to pay it. So now we'll be going based on some of the recommendations in the Pennoman Institute report, strategies to reduce cybersecurity risk. So as Jason said before, some of these data breaches can cost in the millions of dollars. So Michael Scott, instead of declaring bankruptcy, he's going to declare a data breach. Pretty similar there. So again, we're going back to the Pennoman Institute, their recommendations to decrease the cost of that data breach to you and what has been shown proven to decrease the cost. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. You're going to stress test your incident response plan to improve response time and increase cyber resilience. Use tools including unified endpoint management and identity and access management to help protect and monitor endpoints and remote employees. Invest in governance, risk management, and compliance programs. Protect sensitive data in cloud environments using policy and technology. And use managed security services to enrich security capabilities and help close the security skills gap. Especially when workforces have different ages, it's important to all train them and all be on the same page of how to prevent cybersecurity incidents. Back to you, Jason.
Awesome, Elise. And I tried to restrain myself and jump in because there's so much to cover and you did such a fantastic job. So I appreciate it. And I think, it's been fun working on all these things with you. You just kind of got thrown into the mix here. And it's amazing to just kind of see how far you've come already. So as Elise was saying, one of the things that I like about the Pennoman report from the most recent one is what Elise just covered, right? So I could tell you all day what I think would mitigate your risk, right? But what Pennoman did is they said, okay, we're going to connect our cost of data breach research and analysis with what the actual director of IT or the company was doing from a compliance, in a system governance perspective, in an employee training level. And we're going to figure out, okay, how did it actually reduce risk? So this isn't pie in the sky. It's not something we've just, we've just dreamed up because of, based on our long experience. So that's what I love about that report. So we spent a lot of time on it. I think Elise did a great job of giving us a broad overview of the laws. So let's jump into kind of in the last, 10 minutes here, what I hope is the big grand finale. So vendor management. Why start with vendor management? Well, because through vendor management and through fortified cyber defense, which we're about to get to, you can really manage from A to Z, alpha to omega, or alpha to zeta, soup to nuts, however you want to call it. You can really mitigate risk by thinking through this in kind of a vendor management style. And so, who is the service provider? How are we dealing with that relationship? And then, do we want to add a data protection addendum or information security clauses? And so, we've been inundated with XaaS agreements, master services agreements that contain statement of works that are the implementation of a SaaS and an ERP system and all of these technology transactions. And that's where your vulnerability, in an organization is really arising, right? Because you've got your humans that are causing the data breaches, but they're interacting with your software. So how do you to mitigate risk on the employee side, you have to train your employees, and we've got a simple way to do that. And then on the other side of it, you've got to make sure your technology transactions are tight and everything's dialed in. We call it XaaS because all the companies on the line today have entered into these various technology agreements, and they include all kinds of things: cloud services, access to equipment, infrastructure as a service. I mean, you name it. And so, if it involves the internet and there's an agreement, I would encourage you, to reach out to counsel, to have them review it. In the process of reviewing that, you can do a lot of data mapping. You can talk about how your employees are trained. You can talk about your information security policies and procedures. And if you have none, we have templates you can buy off the shelf, for a few $100. We can really, I think, in a very short period of time, for very minimal investment, kind of get you dialed in very quickly. So let's go to the next slide. What Fortified Cyber Defense is, like I said, it's a product that Miller Johnson created in partnership with a local managed service provider called Microvisions. And what it is in fact, if you scroll up, Jeff, we'll go to the headline here. Thanks, buddy. So cybersecurity, compliance, and insurance simplified, right? So it's even got the little squiggly line under it. And so we developed this product because I've done 50 of these presentations in the last 2 or 3 years, and at the end of them, everyone always says, well, what can I do? And I say, well, one thing you can do is you can call me, you can call Elise, you can call Jeff Muth, excuse me, and you can talk to us. And like I said, usually I can mitigate risk within the first 10 minutes of a conversation pretty well. I've gotten better and better at that. But, here's a product that, you basically, this is our XaaS product that we're offering. That's like, choose your level of protection, answer some basic questions about your business, enter your credit card, and in 3 easy steps, 12 months of cyber protection backed by AI-powered insurance starting at $4.99 a month. So what we try to do is take all these best practices, right? Information security policies and procedures. And if you scroll down, Jeff, to the 3 boxes in the middle there, perfect, thanks. You'll kind of see, all the things that we just talked about are baked into here, right? Here's, for $4.99 a month, you get our information security policies and procedures. You get the essential security practices, network scanning and reporting. And, here's the amazing one, is that we baked into it your security awareness training. And some folks on the line may be familiar with this. There's a company that we like called KnowBe4, but there's various training companies. but it's all web-based. It's not, you know, show up to a luncheon and watch a PowerPoint and then you're done. It's, you know, you set up phishing, you set up phishing programs, links to bad websites that are actually fake. And it's really powerful because right after someone does something bad on your network, it takes them to a training video. And then they're trained up on how to not do that again. So we thought, okay, how can we give cybersecurity in a box to every one of our clients? Well, here it is: fortified shield, fortified armor, fortified bunker. And depending on your appetite, you can go pretty high. We assume that kind of everybody has some basic stuff, like maybe antivirus and, you know, maybe some other things. And so what this does is it kind of lays on top of everything, right? So there's network scanning and reporting. So we can find out how many open ports are sitting on your network where someone could come in and attack your network and get in, and then you got to call me because you just had a data breach. And this happens to lots of folks. In fact, I guess it's my job, security. And then you get our policies and procedures. So when you get our policies and procedures, you'll comply with DIFS. You'll be, 98% of the way to complying with, 90% of the laws in the country. Now, if we find out that you operate in Colorado, well, we're going to do a little bit deeper dive. But for the most part, the off-the-shelf stuff works pretty darn good. In fact, it kind of goes back to this thing that I mentioned in the beginning, which is if you care about it and you think about it and you move forward with these things, you will absolutely mitigate risk. And it's those moments where you're working through drafting your information security policy that you go, oh, well, we don't have a mobile device policy. In fact, what happens if one of my employees loses their iPhone and their entire emails is sitting on that iPhone and available? Well, when you've thought through that already, you can go, hey, director of IT, what do I do? Oh, I can shut that down. Oh, you can? Or no, I can't shut that down. We probably want to implement the software to shut that down. And so, what Fortified Shield does is get you started. Fortified Armor adds security scanning and reporting. And then you've got Microsoft Cloud or Exchange scanning and reporting. And then, when you get the Fortified Bunker, you also get the breach help desk, the vulnerability scanning, the dark web monitoring, and a bunch of other stuff. And then, we partnered with an AI driven cybersecurity insurance provider called Cowbell. And so really, if you think back to that slide, the slide that we were looking at that had the 4 pillars of what complying with all the laws are, and those same 4 pillars form the basis for your risk mitigation program, right? If you think back to that, boom, there we go. There's the 4 pillars: employee training, policies and procedures, cybersecurity insurance. So we've thought through these issues. We kind of know the lay of the land, and we've put it all out there. Now, this isn't just a sales pitch, but essentially, I just want everyone, to think about this as it seems like there was an analogy. It was like eating the chocolate elephant one bite at a time. Like, you just need to take the first step. Maybe download some information security policies and procedures. They're becoming very very common, very templatized, and kind of walk through those 4 things, and that's cybersecurity 101. So I hope on this presentation, folks have been able to get an A to Z kind of understanding of the lay of the land, and then I try to go a little bit deeper with some things based on our experience. But we'd be happy to chat with folks if you have any additional questions after this. I do see a number of current Miller Johnson clients on the line, so thank you so much for getting up at 7 in the morning and joining us here. I hope you had your coffee. I've been drinking a little bit while Elise was presenting myself, and I hope I don't see too many conversations, but I hope everyone has a great Thursday and a fantastic 4th of July holiday. It's my favorite holiday. I think maybe ransomware attacks are not as prevalent while everyone's having a good time. Who knows? And they're out of the office, not clicking on phishing links. But anyways, thanks for joining. Hope you have a good day and weekend, and we'll see you next time.